Welcome to the course introduction for Enterprise COBOL Programming Part 2. We have assumed that you've completed the Part 1 or have equivalent knowledge. COBOL has been around for many decades. It's a very powerful programming language. It's very robust. It is probably still the most popular programming language. Many of the programs that have been written in COBOL have actually millions of lines of code in a single program. Some of these programs are really, really large. And there are many, many millions of programs already out there. COBOL is widely used in the Fortune 500 arena and also in the government. It runs particularly well on the IBM mainframes, the Z series. We're going to be looking at Enterprise COBOL, which runs on the ZOS mainframe. Let's look at what this course will entail. This is the Part 2 of the Enterprise COBOL Programming series. This will be followed by a Part 3, Part 4, Part 5, Part 6, and also COBOL Programming with DB2, COBOL Programming with IMS, COBOL Programming with CICS, COBOL Programming with VSAM. In this course, we're going to be looking at a variety of types of sequential I/O. That is, how do you read data that has just been entered from the user? I'm calling that raw data. How do you read data that has already been read, verified, validated, and written out to a disk? How do you write data that will be then used by other programs? How do you write sequential report files? We're going to be focusing a lot on that. Writing reports. There are a number of classic reports that we're going to be looking at. These include, of course, headers and footers, page numbers, but also what are called control break. And the control break programs have subtotals in them and subheaders in them. So within the page, you actually perhaps have other subtotals, and within those subtotals, etc. So we'll be looking at some of the classic ways of writing reports. We're also going to look at some classic intrinsic functions. COBOL introduced intrinsic functions in the COBOL for 370 release, and so that's been around for several decades. We will be looking more at intrinsic functions in Part 3, but this will introduce you to what they are and how COBOL handles functions. And we're going to be looking at table processing. COBOL has its own version of what we call arrays, so we'll be examining those. This course will go into the simple table processing, which is what most programs will use. You find tables in almost every COBOL program. Our objectives for this course are to code and run COBOL programs that process raw data or stored data. I will be providing the JCL that you need in order to run those as well, and suggested JCL for various alternatives. We're going to use copybooks. Copybooks are a way of what I call defensive programming. Like defensive driving, using copybooks is a way to stave off problems, errors that you might otherwise make when you code your program. It standardizes the use of variables across a number of programs. We're going to be looking at transaction logic, transaction master logic. The transaction master logic is going to have a raw data set coming in, which is your transactions, and stored data, which is usually in sorted order, and we will update that master file. There is two very traditional classic logic procedures, and we're going to examine both of them. We're going to look at complex reports, such as the multi-level control break reports that I described. We're going to be looking at tables, what are indices, subscripts, intrinsic functions, and some appropriate compiler options that you might choose to make life easier for you and also to make your program run better. And once we have tables, we will be searching those tables. So we will look at the search verb, which is a sequential search, the search all, which is a binary search, and a classic perform loop to loop through a table. In order to complete this course, I'm recommending that you have completed Enterprise COBOL Part 1, and if you haven't, then at least that you have the equivalent knowledge. Look at the topics that are covered in that course. And that you also have basic working experience with JCL, whether it's JES 2 or JES 3, it doesn't matter, and that you can use TSO ISPF to edit a simple data set and create PDS members. Our topics are I/O for raw data, stored data, and reports. Conditional processing with evaluate. Evaluate is your substitution for the if-then-else type of logic, and evaluate is an extremely powerful verb in COBOL. It is the case structure, but it is stronger than the case that I have seen in any other language. So evaluate is a very popular and very flexible verb for if-then-else type processing. We'll also look at some advanced use of COBOL numbers. You saw Comp 3 in the last course. We're going to look at Comp in this course. The structured programming logic for application programs. We're going to be examining that to make sure that you code modularly. And that's kind of a review a little bit from the last course, but I'm going to be adding to it. We'll also look at the logic for simple reports, the logic for one-level control break reports, the logic for advanced reports. We'll be looking at copybooks, and we will also look at the compiler options for debugging. We'll be looking at the logic for transaction master updates, one-dimensional tables, and searching a table. When you've completed this, you will be a beginning, basic, solid COBOL programmer. Every single one of these modules has hands-on workshops. If you have any questions, please use the comment box that's on your screen, and the lab exercises can be downloaded from the paperclip link. If you cannot do the exercises on a mainframe computer, then you might consider just writing them out by hand and comparing your solutions with the ones that I'm providing. However, it is to your benefit to get access to a mainframe computer where you can compile and link and run all your solutions for these lab exercises. You will actually learn a lot more by actually doing it than by just writing it out. But nevertheless, if you don't have one available, then writing it out is certainly an alternative. So let's get started. You've now completed the introduction to Enterprise COBOL Programming Part 2, and you're ready to start with the first module. Again, if you have any questions about any of the information covered, please use the question and comment box, and thank you for joining me.